What's up, good people? Welcome to our 53-man roster review, reaction, preview. We're going to go over all 53. Jamie, Craig, and myself did not get all 53 right. We each missed a couple, that's for sure. But we will be talking about every position group, guys that kept. We'll talk about all the position groups and how deep they may be or where they may add some players. And as you see, we will be adding a third host here shortly. Jamie is running a little late, but he'll be here when he can, so he will jump on. So it's Craig and I for now, and we're going to just go ahead and kick this thing off. So first off here, this was an easy one because there were only one at each position. There was no competition here. In training camp, we nailed this one, and this was an easy one. We were 3 for 3 off the start. We got Cameron Dicker, the kicker, J.K. Scott as the punter, Josh Harris as the long snapper. Nothing much to say here, Craig, other than that this is special teams.
Yeah, absolutely. There was never really any doubt.
Nope.
This has kind of been solidified now, even since before camp started. So we all knew what it was going to be. There was never really any real competition to speak of because I don't think any was necessary. So, yeah, knock these out of the park.
It was an easy 3 for 3. Josh Harris, nobody cares about. We know Cameron Dicker has been clutch not only in the regular season but also very good in the preseason too. J.K. Scott looks like he's improved from last year. Hopefully he got better as the year went on. Had some hiccups throughout the year, but hopefully he can continue. And we've got your kicker, punter, and long snapper. So let's move on to, I'm sure, the conversation everybody wants to talk about, and that's quarterback. So here's we got in all these lists, we've got the players they ended up keeping and the players that the Chargers ended up cutting. Could possibly be practice squad spots later on, but right now they went with 2. Craig and I had this right. Justin Herbert, Easton Stick. Jamie thought maybe Luis Perez was going to get that QB2 spot, but Easton Stick wins that QB2 role.
Yep. So kind of figured this was kind of going to be the path that they took. Easton just being, I was going to say reliable, but that would be a lie. For the purposes, yeah, absolutely. So weird stream of consciousness. But yeah, so I mean, honestly, no one loves this at all. But if we're being honest about it, we also speculate that this will not be, the final QB room, and that Easton's sort of kind of a placeholder. But we've also heard some interesting news here. I mean, in the past and also today, which I'm sure you can speak to, about maybe potential interest in Easton Stick, which blows my mind, but never mind about all of that. This is what we have right now, but there are also options out there still available, some via trade, some on the wire. So let's see how things pan out over the next few days.
Yeah, what Craig's referring to, and if you're not in the Discord, go join the Patreon. We dropped it this morning, but as of very early this morning, 2 teams were inquiring about trading for Easton Stick. Asked the Chargers if they're opening to trading Easton Stick. The Chargers said yes, and then the other teams were like, "Okay, we'll get back to you." They wanted to see how the rest of the cuts kind of shook out, and those 2 teams never came back. So they either found QBs elsewhere, or going to find QBs elsewhere, or just weren't all that interested. So at the very least, we saw Easton Stick get some teams interested in trading for him. So for now, it's Easton Stick at QB2. They were open to trading him this morning if they got an offer. Well, I don't know what they would have done if they would have got a 7th or whatever, but they were definitely open to it. I don't know what kind of terms they were looking for, but they were open to getting rid of Easton Stick, and possibility he may not be here long term. But for now,
I was gonna say I can imagine why teams weren't chomping at the bit.
And only 2.
Yeah.
And any super sleuths in the chat, one big guess, and you could figure out who one of those teams were of the 2. It will not take you long to deduce and get to what team might want to trade for Easton Stick.
I'll give you a hint though. Perpetual dysfunction.
Okay. All right. And the chat saying Mike White signed to the Bills, so he is not available. I know there was a lot of I mentioned Malik Willis. He got traded to Green Bay, I think.
Yep, Packers.
And we had talked about, man, who was the gunslinger? Heineke. He ended up getting kept by the Falcons. He did not get cut, but there were some other names out there, and I don't know. We'll see if the Chargers are interested in any of those names.
Yeah, I mean, then you got teams like the Browns who are hoarding quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess this is a good year for it. So,
why is that?
Well, you got teams like the Chargers that are in desperate need of a QB2, and they're sitting there with a handful of them almost. So, yeah, I guess they maybe knew what they were doing, but at the end of the day, if you can get something for at least one of these names, then I guess it's a win.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know what they can get, but we'll see. All right, let's go to running backs now. So this was, I mean, we all guessed this, but it is a little sad. We poured one out for the homies, Isaiah Spiller, who did not make the cut. Neither did Elijah Dotson. It was 4. It was the 4 that we all guessed, actually. Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, Kamani Vidal, and Jarrett Patterson gets the RB4.
Can we cue up Take a Bow by Madonna? This is for Isaiah Spiller, man. It was rough, buddy. I really wanted to work out, but it just wasn't meant to be. So another one bites the dust here. But ultimately, man, this Jarrett Patterson selection, it just doesn't sit right with me. I see a path where they could maybe swap him out for someone else. We can probably talk about that later on. But just that name sitting there and also considering who didn't make it bugs me just a little bit.
Yeah, that, you thought coming out so young that it would click at some point, but not only did it not click, he never really got the opportunities. And Jarrett Patterson, I guess, made the most of his. Was definitely talked up a lot in camp. Got that RB4. I had I don't remember when we did hot takes. Was that with Michael McLean?
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, my hot take was Isaiah Spiller was going to get cut, and then that hot take fizzled out with each week. It was it was
hot at the time.
At the beginning of the offseason, it was red hot. But
you still get credit for that.
I guess, but
yeah.
I couldn't really claim it by week 2 of the preseason because it looked like he was on the outside looking in that early. So, yeah, and Elijah Dotson, a preseason hero last year, doesn't make it, maybe a practice squad candidate as well. So there's definitely a chance for them to keep Spiller, maybe keep Dotson, keep him on the practice squad, develop him a little bit more. And, maybe there is still hope for Isaiah Spiller yet.
Yeah, I don't want this lingering around anymore. It's been torture enough. I mean, if they keep him, great. But, man, at the end of the day, I just feel like it's just continuously dangling it in front of me and say, it's a nice little carrot. It seems like it could work out, but for some reason it hasn't. So maybe it's just meant for him to have a change of scenery.
All right, moving on to tight ends. This was very surprising. Now, Craig got this right. It was 3 tight ends: Hayden Hurst, Will Dissly, Stone Smart. I had Donald Parham as my tight end 4. They cut him, which was a big surprise. Also cut Tucker Fisk, who Jamie had as his tight end 4, and then Luke Benson, Zach Hines, and Isaac Rex, who really didn't get a chance getting late in camp. But they stuck with 3. I don't think they keep 3, but for now, there's Hurst, Dissly, and Smart as your 3 tight ends.
Yeah, my thought process behind this was that, they have an option. It's a little versatile that they've been working with throughout the preseason to maneuver between that fullback tight end position, also interior offensive lineman. But I think they like Tucker Fisk, and they'll probably try to get him onto the practice squad. And I can see some shuffling of the roster throughout the season when they want to maybe prioritize some heftier looks in the running game if they really want to beef things up on the edges. And, they can do that by bringing Fisk up. But right now, it's just what made the most sense for me when they were considering other positions of need and guys that they could probably get on the roster that they were more than well, there's one in particular. We'll get to it. It feels like they weren't comfortable letting him take a risk at getting on the waiver wire and not clearing. So this is probably the rationale behind that.
Yeah. There's already talk about trying to get Tucker Fisk back on the practice squad. Donald Parham, I was surprised. I mean, when you look at this list of Hurst, Disley, and Smart, I don't see a lot of receiving weapons in that tight end group. And I get it. Like, Harbaugh hasn't been in the league for a while. Hey, look who's here.
Guys,
hey.
sorry I'm late.
But that's okay. But I just didn't think that Tucker that they were going to just go really light with tight end. I know they probably could add one a little bit later, but it just felt like with this offense, they talked about how important it was for their tight ends to be able to block, which is a big reason why Parham didn't make it. But also, there isn't a lot of receiving weapons here. Hurst being the tight end one, but I mean, it's been a while since he's been effective in this league, being a bona fide tight end one in the NFL. Smart's still working his way up, and Will Disley, while he's got some receiving chops, is mostly a blocking tight end. So this is a group that I think does end up improving. I think they end up adding a fourth tight end when all is said and done after these 53 cuts. But right now it's Hurst, Disley, and Smart. Jamie, how are you feeling about this tight end group?
I agree with what you're saying. I think I was surprised that they went with 3. I figured they would go with 4 for sure. Not all that surprised that they cut Parham, who really hasn't done much in his time with the team. I really thought Fisk was going to land on the roster, at least when they initially broke camp, just because of the blocking, because I figured they would be looking for a second, really good blocking tight end who could maybe play some fullback, some H-back. And Fisk seemed like that guy, and the running game improved dramatically when he was on the field week 2. So I really thought he'd make it. I guess maybe the injury probably played into that a little bit. But I would expect them to add to this group. Not sure where that's going to come from. Initially, I thought maybe Peyton Hendershot. Yeah, might wind up being the guy, but he got traded to the Chiefs. Goddamn Chiefs. So maybe a guy like a Cameron Latu from the 49ers might be an option as a receiving tight end to add some depth to that room, but I would certainly expect them to add a tight end before week 1.
All right, so let's go back a little bit, Jamie, so you can catch us up here on your thoughts. We went over special teams, which we don't need to hear about. Quarterback. You had Luis Perez as your QB2, and here we go, Easton Stick again.
Yeah, I still would not. I don't think they break. I don't think they start the season with Easton Stick as QB2. I still think they're going to add somebody. So he might be a placeholder. I think the big takeaway right now is, we've been railing on them to not keep three quarterbacks for I don't know how long, and they finally only kept 2. My guess is they either pull somebody off of waivers or sign somebody once they clear waivers, and maybe Stick is no more and they stick with 2. I don't think they need 3. And my guess is Perez probably winds up on the practice squad eventually. So I don't know how you can be comfortable going with Stick as your QB2 at this point. He was terrible in the preseason. He was terrible when he got to play last year. I mean, most teams are screwed if their backup quarterback's on the field for an extended period of time, but the Chargers are really screwed if his Stick is on the field for an extended period of time. So there's no ties there. The front office has changed over. The coaches have changed over. I think he's keeping somebody else's seat warm right now. And I think they go with 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah. We talked about the inquiries this morning on Easton Stick and the Chargers being open to trading him. So yes, that we'll see on whether they add another quarterback. And then running back here, Jamie, Isaiah Spiller, Elijah Dotson.
No real surprises here, right? Like we kind of knew who the top 3 guys were, and it was pretty easy based on preseason carries to figure out who the 4th guy was. Not particularly surprised they kept 4 in an offense that's going to run the ball a lot, with the top 2 guys being, injury prone. Spiller, he just didn't work. So no tears shed on this side. I had hoped he'd figure things out and figure out a way to stick around, but it just didn't work out, and you couldn't make a compelling argument to keep him. So we finally have a coaching staff here who is making the right decisions based on production and what they're seeing on the field and in practice, and they're not playing favorites and they're not getting emotionally tied to guys. So it's a refreshing change. Sorry, Craig.
No, it's all good, man. I came to terms last Saturday.
All right. So then we just talked about tight ends. Let's move on to wide receivers. I think it's 7. Yeah. Palmer, McConkey, Quentin Johnston, DJ Chark, Darius Davis. They kept Brendan Rice and they kept Semi Fehoko, which means the 7th round pick Cornelius Johnson did not make it. Jalen Johnson, Jalen Gill, and Isaiah Wooden also did not make the cut.
So this surprises me. I had them only keeping 5 receivers in my 53, even though I spent the whole offseason saying they needed to keep 6. I did not see 7 coming at all. I kind of doubt they go into week 1 with 7. I kind of feel like Rice is a guy who's going to hang around for as long as possible until those practice squad teams are filled out, and then they try to sneak him onto the practice squad. I don't think he starts the season on the team because I don't think he earned it. And I think this is the one position or one of the few positions on the team that you look at and say, he didn't really earn it. What's he doing here? It's just kind of surprising outside of being a draft pick and having the draft capital tied to him. There wasn't really a concrete, production statistical reason to keep him. So it surprised me, but I think he winds up on the practice squad eventually.
Yeah. So Semi Fehoko basically strong-armed his way onto this roster. They made it to where they could not let him go. Best wide receiver throughout the preseason on the squad. And if you ask me, as far as Brendan Rice is concerned, of course, I wanted him to make the roster. Didn't believe he would, which is why I went with 6 with Semi over him in my 53 prediction. But honestly, he didn't earn it in preseason games, but it seemed like they were very pleased with him through practices. And I'm assuming that they weighed that pretty heavily and then took it in consideration that when you go back and look at some of the balls that Stick was throwing to him, amongst other players, but specifically to Rice, for some reason, he was throwing the worst passes to Rice. It's almost like he had a vendetta against him or something. It was really weird. But I mean, again, when you're in that position, you have to do what you have to when you're, a 7th round draft pick you've got to make the tough plays. You've got to stand out. And Rice didn't necessarily do that during games, but again, he was showing out during practice, and I think that went a long way for him. So I don't think it's just the name recognition. He showed enough consistently day in and day out. It just didn't really show up during the games, and he did have some of those practices with Justin Herbert, so it probably went a long way for him.
Yeah, see, Fehoko absolutely earned it. I don't think Rice did. This is a spot where personally, I would have gone with Tremont Morris-Brash, who we'll get to, I'm sure, here shortly. But I felt like he earned it and Rice didn't. But again, I think they're kind of protecting their draft capital and trying to sneak Rice on the practice squad. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, I was going to make the same point. It felt like guys like TMB or Fisk made cases for making the 53, while Rice did not. And so I know a lot of people are talking about the name and how he'd get scooped up as soon as he hit the wire, but I don't know that would be the case. But either way, they felt like they needed to be a little bit safe with this, and it feels like this is the 53rd player they added just so they can stash him for now, put him in the 2nd or 3rd wave of cuts, and then while teams have already filled out the roster, and then replace whether that's another a tight end or somewhere else. Rice feels like probably the first cut when they start adding new players.
They're playing no, go ahead, Jamie.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the other point too, that I don't know if you guys brought up earlier or not, but Chark was in shorts and a t-shirt at practice today. So he may not be ready for week 1. So that might be why they kept 7. They may have kept Rice for Chark insurance. And then once Chark is ready, Rice, they might try to shuttle Rice to the practice squad.
Yep. Good point. But they are definitely playing it fast and loose with TMB. If Morris-Brash clears waivers. I think, and I know some people out there for some reason don't think he's very good. I don't know why you get that impression. The dude just showed up all camp long and during games. I don't know what else he could have done to make a name for himself or carve out a role on this team. So if he clears, we need to be thanking our lucky stars. If he does not, it shouldn't be a shock to anyone.
Yeah. So maybe Rice does replace Baby Chark. That's the reason why they brought him on this time around. But either way, it felt like there were some guys that maybe deserved to be in that 53 and earn that spot. But Rice is in here. They're keeping 7 for right now. Moving on to offensive line. This was all the guys we had talked about: Rashawn Slater, Zion Johnson, Bradley Bozeman, Trey Pipkins, Joe Alt, Jamari Salyer, Jordan McFadden, Brendan Hymas, and Foster Sorrell make it. The cuts: Alex Leatherwood, thank God, Brett Lang, Carson Barnhart, Willis Patrick, and then to the IR, season-ending IR, is Bucky Williams and Tyler McClellan.
Yeah, there's no surprises here. I think we all picked this exact same list. And the term, I guess the operative term here is going to be versatility, because that is what went a long way with some of the selections here. Aside from Carson Barnhart, there weren't a bunch of guys that could play multiple positions. Willis Patrick was definitely a favorite of mine. So hopefully they can get him onto the practice squad, because I think there's really something there as a player. He showed out during the preseason. But again, he's a guard. And I don't think, he'll be kicking out the tackle anytime soon or snapping the ball. So, kind of pigeonholed him a bit. But the performance didn't speak to someone who shouldn't be making a team. He just, became a victim of the numbers game, but also the fact that he's not as versatile as some of the other names there. So, ironically enough, as much as we despise Foster Sorrell, he actually played pretty decently at guard. So, again, versatility, who knew? And the coaching staff is being able to develop some of these guys who've been on the roster for a few that couldn't seem to take any steps forward. But there you go. You spend the bread on a decent coaching staff and look at the results.
Yeah, I think Sorrell earned his spot. As much as we've all ripped him over the last couple of years, this is a guy who, he played a lot in the preseason, played tackle, played guard. I think he played both tackle positions and right guard, if I'm not mistaken, in games. So, and I don't, outside of a couple of false starts, I don't remember him standing out, which is about the best thing that you can say. It's the highest compliment I think you can pay Sorrell after the last 2 or 3 years, is that he was on the field a lot and you hardly noticed him. That's a good thing. So I would say he earned it. Thank God Alex Leatherwood is gone. I'm tired of watching that guy whiff blocks on the field. Patrick is a guy who I like at guard. I mean, he came to camp as a tackle and they moved him to guard. So maybe there's some versatility to be developed there. But I did like him as a pulling guard. He looked really good in the run game at times, pulling across the line of scrimmage. So somebody to keep an eye on for the practice squad. My guess is they'll probably keep 2 of these guys on the practice squad. I wouldn't be surprised to see Barnhart wind up there as well. Yeah. They were probably targeting McClellan. You kind of wonder if McClellan might have wound up making the roster if he had not gotten hurt. But yeah, I mean, no real surprises in this group. Again, I think we all tried to talk ourselves out of Sorrell, and none of us were successful in doing so. So there he is.
Yeah, it felt like that last position was up for grabs, but it didn't feel like anybody really took hold of it. It felt like Foster Sorrell did pretty nice with everything he was asked to do this preseason. And Carson Barnhart, I think, ends up making the practice squad. I mean, I think he was the highest paid UDFA in terms of guarantees. So I know Harbaugh really wanted his Barnhart there. He was a captain over at Michigan of that O-line for a long time. He was a mainstay. And then Willis Patrick was also really impressive. So I think those two, Patrick and Barnhart, have a pretty good chance of making the practice squad. But other than that, no real surprises. Then we're on to defense. And it's the interior. We got this one right as well. Morgan Fox, Poona Ford, Tito Abonia, Tier Tart, Scott Matlock, and Justin Aboigbe make it. Christopher Hinton, Gerard Clark, and CJ Okoye do not. They end up getting cut. And guys, it seems like there's maybe 1 or 2 names here for the practice squad. No? You think Hinton's out?
I think Hinton's probably out. Okoye is a guy who maybe, I mean, they cut him. So I don't know. I'm not sure how the procedure works, but did they have to cut him to move him onto that exempt spot as the international player? I kind of feel like that was the previous regime's guy, and they're gone now, so he's gone too. So I think they'll be looking for defensive linemen for the practice squad over the next few days.
So you think nobody from this, not Hinton, Clark, or Okoye, do not make the practice squad?
I don't know. I just don't feel like any of them really stood out or did much of anything in the preseason.
Oh, see, I think Gerard Clark flashed this preseason.
Yeah, same. Of that list, for me, Clark's the only name that really stands out. I mean, I watch Hinton get blown off the ball consistently, snap in and snap out. And just, it was really evident really after week 1 that he probably wasn't going to be cut out for the roster. But Gerard Clark, especially in tandem with T.R. Tart, looked really good against the run. They wreaked a little havoc there a couple of weeks ago. So Clark's always been just that bigger body that needed development, someone that can push the pocket and take on double teams. So yeah, it makes perfect sense to me that Clark will wind up on the practice squad. The Okoye situation, I'm not exactly sure how that works either with like the international pathway situation. I'm not sure if they have to cut him and then move him or what. I don't remember how that works.
Yeah, I still have a feeling that Hinton, I mean, I know he's part of the pass regime, but not that I want him on the practice squad, but just feels like as depth. I think Clark makes it above all 3 of these guys if they can, but it feels like Hinton might have a chance. But other than that, I mean, Foxford, Abonia, Tart, Matlock, Aboigby were locks. It feels like, I mean, Aboigby's not going anywhere because of the 4th round pick. They're going to end up keeping him, but Tito, I mean, feels like he could be on the fringe here if they really find a group of guys that they like on the waiver wire during these cuts. It feels like he might be on his way out and part of that like last bottom fringe of the 53.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, Harbaugh's talked very positively about him during mini camp and during training camp. So I'm not really sure they're looking to make any sweeping changes or any big changes to this group. I feel like Tito flashed a handful of times in the preseason. Looked pretty good against the run. I don't remember him getting to the quarterback or really doing much as a pass rusher, but he was getting penetration and I think disrupting at least in the interior. I think they probably think they're good with this group is my guess, but I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I mean, combined, I think the rotation's pretty decent, especially when you consider the addition of T.R. Tart. Still in all, I would love to see them make some sort of pickup here, potentially off the waiver wire if anyone's available and worth it, because of Tito Abonia for me, yeah, flashed here and there. I think he did a pretty decent job at standing up in the run game. Again, maintaining a line of scrimmage and allowing the linebackers to kind of scrape and make plays. But I think they just need another interior disruptor. Bringing Tart on board gives you a little bit of that. And then you've got, names like Matlock, Poona Ford, which, Matlock remains to be seen. We have to see what version of Poona Ford we're now getting. But there's potential there. But again, if there's a name that just kind of pops out here on the wire at some point, or even if they went about it via trade, I'd be perfectly fine with it. I don't love Tito. I don't hate him as a player, but I just think right now he's just kind of a guy.
Yeah. They're all kind of a guy. I mean, Fox is a good pass rusher, but none of these guys are really like well-rounded, versatile, diversely skilled players. Like they're all just kind of there.
Well, there's guy levels. Like, yeah, there's nobody in here that's a standout per se, but I mean, I wouldn't necessarily.
There are levels of just a guy.
Yeah, there's levels. So to me, like, I think Poona Ford is a much better player than Tito. Again, he hasn't had great years the last couple of years, but I do think he's a better player than Tito. I wouldn't say that he's a standout. But when you look at this line in totality, yeah, I mean, it could definitely improve, but I don't think they're all equal footing.
All right, so moving on to edge here. This was the big surprise for a lot of people here. Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Thule, and Bud Dupree. I had the 4. You guys had them keeping Tremont Morris Brash, who ends up getting cut, which was a pretty big surprise. Ty Shelby, Andrew Farmer, and Savion Jackson did not make it. Chris Rumpf is on season-ending IR, and so is Chris Collins. So they end up keeping 4 of these pass rushers.
Yeah, I'm surprised that this is, we talked about guys who earned spots that didn't get them. Not something I was really expecting from Harbaugh and Ortiz, but to me, Morris Brash is a guy who earned a spot and didn't get it. We talked about Tucker Fisk earlier, earning a spot and not getting it. So I was pretty surprised. But, at the end of the day, you're talking about a UDFA in a room of 3 proven guys and an ascending guy. So maybe they feel comfortable enough that he'll clear waivers. And if they don't get him back, they're fine with it. And if they do, they're ecstatic.
With the way Morris Brash was talked up during this preseason, it just feels really awkward. Now, Jamie mentioned it with DJ Chark going down and potentially maybe not being available week 1 and Brendan Rice making the roster. That could be the rationale behind it. But overall, this just feels funky, man. The dude did everything he possibly could. I mean, he went above and beyond. This was a name that, I think some people were familiar with as a UDFA, but as far as what he produced out on the field, again, when you think about the lasting impression, the last thing you remember from this guy is a pick 6. So for him to have that type of performance and be the consistent player that he was throughout the preseason is someone that I don't know if many people expected to really have an opportunity to make the roster. It just, it doesn't feel justified to me. And again, if he clears waivers, thank your lucky stars. But I would be a little shocked if he does.
Yeah, he feels like outside of maybe Fisk or I don't know, but he feels like the top priority to get back on your practice squad. He feels like the 54th guy on this. I didn't end up keeping him, but it felt like if any player deserved to make the roster, Tremont Morris Brash was one of them. And then we talked about it earlier. It didn't feel like Brendan Rice really deserved that spot, but they're rolling with the 4 they had: Bosa, Mack, Thule, and Dupree. If they need any help there, Tremont Morris Brash, hopefully they can get on the practice squad. They feel like hopefully he's a top priority to get back in that room because he was very good this preseason. And to end on a pick 6 in your last game, it just feels like that's the thing that kind of puts you over the edge, but not this time.
Yeah, I don't like Craig said, I don't know what else he could have done. He was great against the run. He affected the quarterback. He looked good in coverage, and he had that pick 6. That's kind of all the boxes checked. So kind of surprising to see him not make it.
All right, we're going on to linebackers here. They end up keeping 4. They keep Denzel Perryman, Dayon Henley, Junior Colson, and Troy Dye. Shane Lee, who I think flashed throughout this preseason, and you could have argued maybe to sneak on there as a 5th linebacker, did not make it. Jean Baptiste did not make it, Shaq Quarterman or Frank Ginda, and they put Nick Neiman on the designated to return IR.
Yeah, I think none of us really understood how bad Neiman's injury was, or we probably would have put him there ourselves. But he'll be back eventually. Core special teamer. They obviously value him, or they would have put him on season-ending IR. So no real big surprises here. I think, you do – hopefully Neiman is back quickly, and hopefully they land Lee, and maybe they get like Quarterman as a veteran guy on the practice squad because – Perriman doesn't really stay healthy. Colson's been banged up, and then you're down to Dye and Henley. So you would like to have some depth on the practice squad just to protect against anything happening either during practice or week 1 in the game to where now you're down to 3 linebackers and you're screwed. So they left themselves a little bit thin, but I'm sure they'll figure something out.
Yeah. So I didn't have Neiman making my original 53, but that was without me thinking about him potentially going on IR. I don't even think I realized that he was injured at that point. But I really like what I saw from Shane Lee. He's a linebacker who always seems to be around the ball. And I liked his ability to kind of, scrape and track sideline to sideline. So he showed some really good pursuit, took some pretty solid angles and looked like a really decent tackler. So someone that should be considered for the practice squad, and I wouldn't be surprised if he makes it at all. In fact, I believe he should. And yeah, Shaq Quarterman is a veteran, another Miami player, so kind of in the same vein as a Denzel Perriman. They're thumpers, so more of the types that you want to have in the game to be run defenders. They aren't going to offer you a whole bunch in coverage. But Quarterman is a guy with some experience, can absolutely play the run, and there's some more development there. And I think you can have someone who can be a little bit of a stalwart there alongside of a more versatile linebacker. I guess it just depends on what you're looking for at the second level. If you want to blend, or if you want a guy who can do a little bit of both, he's more Perriman than he is a Henley or a Colson.
So with Neiman on the IR, the top four that they kept were no surprise. Troy Dye felt like he was maybe on the fringe going into camp, but they were talking him up pretty big early on, and it just felt like he earned that LB4 role. But with Nick Neiman, the only thing for me is just how important he's been to the special teams. And without him for a few weeks, it feels like, and we'll talk about it a little bit, when you keep an extra corner or safety, you're going to now have to pick up the slack where Nick Neiman will not be. So if you're not keeping Tremont Morris-Brash, who you'd hope be able to help on special teams, a lot of these DBs now, as we get into them, are going to have to pitch in, because not only is TMB not on the team and on the practice squad, but then you've got Nick Neiman, who's a pretty important special teams player. Now you got to get some more hands on deck. So
you're without Chris Rump too, who is another core special teamer.
Yep, exactly. So while I never want to see Nick Neiman hit the field as a defender, as a special teams player, I think he's a pretty important piece. So hopefully he's back soon and will help on special teams. Now for corner, they ended up keeping both rookies. We kind of went back and forth on these, but it's Asante Samuel Jr., Christian Fulton, Jasir Taylor, Dean Leonard, who absolutely earned it during the preseason in my mind, Tarheeb Still, and Cam Hart. They did not keep. They ended up cutting Matt Hankins, Samari Walton, and Robert Kennedy.
So it's pretty. I think it's across the board. I think we may have no, Jamie, yours was a little different. I think, if I recall correctly, right?
I had them keeping Woods as a corner, and cutting Hart. So yeah, mine was a little different.
Okay, so yeah, and also that's the other thing we'll get to here in a second. Someone has already been typecast incorrectly. He should definitely be a corner, and we should never see him on the safety list ever again. But I mean, it's the way that they're playing it, so we'll see how it goes. But as far as this list is concerned, nothing here shocks me. Cam Hart definitely needs a lot of work. He did miss some time here in the preseason with an injury, and he's got to work on the tackling. That stood out like a sore thumb on Saturday. And I mean, you can't be that size of a corner and not be wrapping guys up, just throwing shoulders, diving at guys like that. It looks really bad on tape. And also, you're going to give up big plays that way. And there's no excuse for it. Again, you're a bigger body guy. That should be one of your strong suits. I actually liked what I saw specifically from Robert Kennedy, but also like Matt Hankins too. So those are two guys that I think can make it to the practice squad. I'm sure there's some developmental opportunity with them as well. Jasir Taylor, we'll see. I've said it for a few weeks now. Everything in me tells me that Tarheeb Still is going to have that slot job by like mid-season. If I'm wrong, fine. No big deal. If Jasir plays up to the standard that they're hoping that he will, great. Everyone will be the better for it. And, I'll be proven wrong. But as things currently stand, I feel like that slot position has Tarheeb Still's name written all over it. So I wouldn't be shocked if he takes it over.
Yeah, I feel like looking at this list, you can look at pretty much all these guys and say, yep, they earn their way on as corners. Taylor, I think with Neiman being out and Rump being out, keeping another core special teamer in Taylor makes sense. I just don't think he's earned that starting slot role. We talked about this over the weekend when we did our projections. I feel like he's the one guy in that group that has not earned his spot. It feels like they've just handed him the starting nickel spot, which is so weird to me coming from a Harbaugh coach team where you think they're going to go with the guys who earned it, but he just has not been good in the slot. And I think Craig is probably right. You're probably going to see Tarheeb Still work his way up and wind up being the primary nickel corner before too long, because I don't think Taylor is going to hang there.
And there is a kind of important distinction if you care about this type of thing, but James Heritage brought it up. The Chargers on Chargers.com announced the corners and safeties as all DBs. They did not break it up like this for corners or for safeties. This was a list I got online and not from Chargers.com for corners and safeties. So Chargers kind of blending that line a little bit.
Well, they did that during preseason games too. I mean, most of these guys played inside, outside, and they played safety. At least the guys towards the back of the depth chart did. So, not entirely surprised to see them do that. It seems like they're really putting an emphasis on versatility, like we've talked about at some of the other positions, the ability to play more than one position in the secondary. And I think most of these guys can do that for the most part. So it'll be interesting to see how they get deployed. I hope Leonard works his way up the depth chart. He was so good in the preseason. He's a guy who, I mean, truly earned his spot on the roster and should be competing for more playing time because that length and that athleticism, and now you're starting to add ball skills to it and more awareness as to where the ball is. There, I think with the physical and athletic traits that he has, that's a kid who has the ability to be really, really good at corner if he just starts getting some playing time.
I mean, some of this kind of feels like semantics because Asante Samuel Jr. is a corner. You're not going to see him lining up at safety a ton, but also a lot of these guys were cross-training, so for sure, it makes sense to call them DBs. But let's be honest, we know what some of these guys' primary position is. That's what they're going to play. If they mix them in a bit here or there, one guy has to play a certain position in a pinch, then we get it.
Yeah, and, I feel like you guys have talked about Jasir Taylor, but it also feels like going into the season, I feel like he's on a really, really short leash with the way Tarheeb still played, the way they've talked him up in camp, how much this coaching staff loves still, and how good he just played in the preseason. It just feels like Jasir Taylor is the starter for now until he no longer can hang. And that still is just like right over his shoulder, ready to step in because he looked great in the preseason. And man, the ball skills showed off not only in training camp, but even in the preseason. He looks ready to play day one. So, while Jasir Taylor might have the starting role early on, I'm with Craig. I think, by midseason, 3/4 of the way through the season, we're going to see Still getting a lot more corner snaps because I don't know how you keep him off the field. Leonard is another guy I'd like to see get some snaps. Leonard was also really important on special teams, so he'll be back there again too. Cam Hart just feels like he's a ways away with the way he was trying to tackle in the preseason.
Just to add to your point about the slot position too, Durham was playing a lot of nickel with the first team defense in camp. So Jasir is technically the starting nickel, but we might see a lot more of Derwin in that role as Finley starts to get more comfortable in the defense and starts to see more time on the field at safety. I think they'll start moving Derwin around more. So Taylor might only be the starting nickel in name only as they start to add some of these pieces around him to start to fill that spot.
And no, go ahead, Garrett.
No, go ahead, Craig. I was just going to add a little exclamation point, but go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the thing that's going to get Still in the game is the fact that he's a much more physical corner than Taylor is. And he will not, I think he's a little bit smaller in stature, maybe they're around the same size. I don't remember exact height and weight, but Still's a guy who's not afraid to get downhill and get dirty in the run game. But also, when we're talking about DBs over having specific, designations as corners or safeties, I think Still has a little bit of safety in him because he has the instincts when he sees the ball. When the ball's in front of him and he can see the entire field, and he has the ability to scan, he gets the opportunity to show how instinctual he actually is. I've never thought Jasir Taylor had the best instincts as a football player. He's a really good athlete, but as far as being around the ball, locating the ball, I think Still has him beat like head and shoulders above Jasir Taylor in that regard. So if you see Tarheeb Still kind of maneuvered around a bit, and say for instance they throw Derwin in there at the slot, you see Hill Still playing a little bit of the back third, then I wouldn't be shocked with that either. But Still offers to me a little bit more than Taylor does overall, and you'll see him develop more and more and more. So don't be shocked if he ends up being a mainstay in the defense.
They have Jasir Taylor listed as 5'10", 185, and Tarheeb still at 6 foot 196.
Okay, so yep, still bigger boy.
Still a bigger boy. Yep. And isn't it crazy to think that we thought this was the weakest group on the roster, and now we're talking about guys like Dean Leonard and Tarheeb still being so impressive that they have some pretty good depth here, even starting type players in their secondary. It's crazy to think about this group.
I mean, this group looked like arguably the worst collection of corners in the league when we did our projections back in July or whatever it was. I mean, I specifically said this might be the worst position group in the league.
In the NFL. Yep. You did say that. That's true. All right. So let's wrap this up. We got safeties here, and this is where JT Woods is listed. They ended up keeping Derwin James, Alohi Gilman. They kept the veteran, Tony Jefferson. The friend of the podcast, AJ Finley, made the team. And JT Woods, they ended up cutting Akeem Dent, a guy that was very impressive in preseason, Thomas Harper, and then also Jalen Phillips.
Yeah, I'm surprised to see them keep 5 safeties, first of all. But I think when they decided to keep Jefferson, they kind of had to keep a 5th safety for special teams reasons. Just from a roster building standpoint, you're not going to see Derwin play special teams. You're not going to see Gilman play special teams. And I seriously doubt they're going to throw Jefferson out there on special teams. So I think they needed to keep an extra one just to make sure they had enough bodies for special teams, especially on the coverage units. I mean, Jefferson's a guy who, outside of that last game, he spent most of the camp practicing with the 3s. He wasn't getting any first team run really at all in terms of safety in team drills and team practices. And he had that one great preseason game that stood out. And I think that's the lasting memory. And he winds up earning his way on, probably because he's a veteran and because he had that great 3rd game. Finley's a guy who we've been talking about for a year now. He can play both safety spots. He can play in the box. You can play him in the slot if you need to. Special teams. Yep. He's got good instincts. He's got good ball skills. He's got pretty good range. He does everything pretty well, and he's physical. And Woods, we talked about on Saturday, the kid earned it, man. I mean, we've been killing him for 2 years. But they put him at corner, and they made him look like a football player, and they put him in a position to succeed. And he took advantage of every single snap he got in the preseason and flat out earned a spot. He looked amazing, and hopefully he continues to do what he's doing and work his way up the depth chart, because having those kind of skills at corner to develop it's a pretty fun prospect to think about.
Jamie, you've already spoken to it, so we know about the athleticism and what he brings on the outside. Specifically, we're talking about playing boundary corner, but that's the most comfortable and confident I've seen JT Woods play football. And that's saying a lot. The last 2 years, it's been ugly in every way that it could be. Well, I mean, last year he was basically on a milk carton with something. I still don't know what was going on there. But
felt like he took a mental health break.
Yeah. However it went.
Season. Yeah.
Just was, not available for whatever the reason was. But Woods looks like, I mean, I don't think we're waxing poetic about him here at all. The dude looks like a football player at corner and someone that you can develop. And it doesn't look like it's going to take very long. The coverage ability flashed. Even I believe it was the first game of the season preseason against the Rams. He was defending the slot on a 2-way go for a guy who doesn't have great change of direction. He broke that route down masterfully. He broke on the ball as if he knew what the wide receiver's route was, and he looked like a pure cover corner. And you put somebody like that with a bigger body that you can utilize and press. He showed that. I mean, he did whiff on one tackle on Saturday. It looked pretty bad, but the rest of the time, dude was going in there like with his hair on fire. The technique still needs work, but he's willing, and he's showing that he can actually play the position and he won't be a liability as much in the running game. And I said, because his game is so linear, I think if you just give him a third of the field to defend with less space, it probably plays better to his skill set. Tony Jefferson, essentially, I think he may have earned the first Hall of Fame gold jacket in preseason. I don't think that's happened before. Like that was a world-class performance. Yep. And to me, it feels as if that is what got him this roster spot. I don't know that if he doesn't have the game that he has Sunday, if he's on this 53. And so, Derwin definitely wanted him around because of the veteran presence he brings. Also, he understands the defense and he's a leader in that way. But man, we talked about it like not being a prisoner of the moment, but I don't know how you look at what that guy put on tape, rewatch that, and see someone who didn't remind you a lot of Derwin. I don't expect that to be a game in and game out thing, but if he can give you something like that every now and again, if he can pull that up, that can be the difference between you getting the extra 1 or 2 wins. And having someone with that type of experience that understands the defense the way that he does is pretty much invaluable. So again, I understand why he made the roster. But as far as some of the guys that didn't, Thomas Harper is the name that sticks out because ultimately I felt like it was going to be either he or Tony Jefferson, and Tony just made it really, really difficult, to keep him away. So Thomas Harper hopefully makes the practice squad because I think he has a really bright future, and he's a player that can thrive in the scheme. Another guy who played at Notre Dame and has some familiarity with the DB's coach. So yeah, Thomas Harper's the name. Akeem Dent, didn't see a whole lot from him during the preseason. Had that one pick at the practice that we went to. Someone that I thought could maybe potentially find his way onto the 53. Really, I thought he'd end up being a practice squad guy. So if they keep him around again, I won't be totally shocked. But Dent has some growing to do. Harper looks like in years past, he's probably a guy that makes the 53 man if Tony Jefferson isn't here, but also this year too. So it's saying a lot about him as a player. And I feel kind of bad that we won't see him right off the bat, but hopefully he does make it to the practice squad because he's someone I want to stick around.
Yeah. It felt like Thomas Harper was on his way to the 53 if Tony Jefferson didn't like mega evolve in the last game. It was, I don't know. I don't know how you don't keep him on the team. We, Craig and I talked about it. Just felt like with a game like that, you got to keep him. And Derwin James loves having Jefferson around. I know we talk about Herbert's Binky and Easton Stick, so maybe this veteran presence helps. I don't know, but love that AJ Finley made it. He was kind of on the fringe before, but he was a solid. You knew he was going to be like the safety 3 in this group. Behind Gilman and James, who can easily slip in. And, in the interview we did, he said he cross-trained. He did safety. He's played corner. He's played in nickel, played in dime. So a kid that's been able to play everywhere and could be a plug-and-play guy if any of these guys get hurt. JT Woods, you guys talked about how impressive he's been. And Thomas Harper, hopefully, is a guy you can get on the practice squad because it feels like outside of the guys we mentioned, we talked about TMB, Morris Brash, and then Fisk and Harper, those feel like the top 3 priorities when you're heading into to the practice squad. Luis Perez is in there somewhere, but it feels like Harper, Fisk, and Morris Brash are your top 3 guys you got to put priority on if they don't get picked up to bring back in that building because there's something there with each of them. They showed it in camp and in the preseason. So I like Thomas Harper a lot. I felt like he was ready to make this roster. It just felt like Jefferson made that last leap in the last game, and they're going with 5 safeties on this list, but AJ Finley already playing special teams makes a difference there. And then it looks like JT Woods is probably going to be another guy that might have to pitch on special teams as well.
You kind of wonder if Jefferson making the roster is like, if Harper makes the roster, does Woods make the roster? Does Jefferson making the roster make it easier to carry Woods and thereby pushing Harper out? Because I did not think they'd carry 5 safeties.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Yeah, I think they kind of had to with the way it shook out. But if Harper winds up sealing that spot up, you kind of wonder if Jefferson or Woods are on the roster, especially Woods.
Yeah, I think we all had Woods as a corner. So that's one thing. I wasn't even thinking about Woods as a safety any longer. I mean, again, he can play safety. I mean, not well, but that's his original position. It's what they drafted him for. But I mean, he was even seen during the draft process as someone that the Chargers potentially thought could play corner as well. So I guess it just worked out. Just took a decent coaching staff to figure it out for him. So ultimately, though, Thomas Harper is a guy that I really enjoy watching play. So it'd be a shame to have him go off somewhere else.
It's funny that the guys that scouted him and helped get him drafted in JT Woods said, "Hey, we think he could be a corner." And then then the coaching staff goes, I don't know. I think it's a safety. And then that doesn't work out. And then you get a real coaching staff in there, and it's like, wait a minute, he is a corner. Like, and then I'm sure the guys who scouted him all along were like, "We told you. We've been telling you for years." They just took a good coaching staff to listen and finally implement it.
One more thing, though. This is why I need Thomas Harper to eventually make this roster.
Okay.
Because a lot of people out there know one of my best friends, his brother is a former football player, played for the Saints, won a Super Bowl, Roman Harper. So we would have a Harper that wears 41, and that's kind of their family number. So I told him, if Thomas Harper makes the team, I'm going to buy the jersey and force him to wear it because he's a Chiefs
fan.
And that's why we need Thomas Harper.
If for no other reason.
All right. Hey, if you guys have any other questions, let us know. We're pretty much wrapped up here. Did you guys? I mean, I haven't really been able to go down all the cuts. Was there any names that you guys saw that you kind of stuck out to you? Oh, Craig's already.
You said cuts, or are you talking about guys on the waiver wire? The Chargers.
Yeah. Cut by other teams.
So the one that really sticks out to me is Kene Nwagwu, the running back kickoff returner for the Vikings. I imagine this would be like Ryan Ficken's wet dream, because Kene would immediately turn the Chargers into a top return unit in the league, paired with Darius Davis. This would also free Davis up to be more of an offensive threat if they wanted like an additional explosive element at Herbert's disposal, like more consistently. And he would also make more sense to me as like the fourth running back supplanting Jared Patterson, because Nwagwu would actually offer a skill set that differentiates and complements Edwards, Dobbins, and Vidal. So he's got that game-breaking, like angle erasing speed. The dude ran up 4.3 240, and he's got high end agility to match. So that's the name for me if they can figure out how to get their hands on him, because like I said before, it gets someone off of the roster that I don't necessarily want on it. So this is, I guess it's very selfish, but I think the team would benefit from it as well.
Deontay Foreman was a name that stood out to me, the running back from Cleveland. Mm-hmm. Rumor is they want to bring him back, but they have to do some roster maneuvering to get him back. Waiting for them to realize they're probably not going to trade one of their quarterbacks and cut one of those guys. Tyler Huntley is a name that keeps popping up. He hasn't been cut yet, but he's an option. Taylor Heineke as a backup quarterback would be interesting.
He got kept.
Oh, I thought he got cut.
Mm-mm.
Oh, I thought I saw he got cut.
No, yeah.
My bad.
Yeah.
Well,
was there somebody else?
No. Oh. Well, I mentioned earlier Cameron Latu, the tight end from San Francisco, might be a good option as a receiving tight end.
Jamie, the Browns are doing the Ravens thing, like what they do with tight ends. The Browns are doing it with QBs.
Yeah, it's not
just hoarding.
Not going to work. The wrong four. It's not going to work out for him.
Yeah. We've gotten this a lot in the chat, like throughout the entire stream. What are you guys' feelings on Desmond Ridder as QB2? No thoughts or no thank you?
I don't have anything nice to say.
Okay.
I mean, look, I don't love what I saw from him when he was with the Falcons. Actually, it was pretty terrible at times. It was quite laughable. The dude was force-fed into the game just because of the QB situation that they had. I think he was overdrafted in the first place, and he's just never been properly developed. So you could look at it from the standpoint of he could grow under a head coach like Harbaugh that played the position and behind Herbert, and they could potentially develop him. But I've just never loved his game as an athletic guy, but as a passer, there's a lot left to be desired. And I also think that maybe there's just a better option now. Question is, would you take him over Stick? Therein lies the real dilemma, potentially, if you want to call that a dilemma.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not a Stick fan, but I don't know how much, if any, of an improvement Ridder is over Stick at this point.
And then what about Bailey Zappi?
Oh.
This is where we're at, fellas.
We're at the any quarterback will do phase.
Anybody but Stick.
Which is
I guess
almost true. It's almost true. Not entirely true, but almost true.
I think at least with Ritter, you get a bit more athleticism. I don't remember Zappi being an athletic quarterback. I could be wrong. I don't remember a whole lot of Bailey Zappi because, I mean, that's what, Patriots. So I didn't watch a ton of Pat stuff.
One name that stuck out was Caleb Farley from the
Farley.
Titans. Yeah,
Yeah.
Farley.
Mm-hmm.
Former first-round pick. I don't know. There might be something there. I don't know if they need any depth there at corner. Jackson Carman got cut today from the Bengals, who was a pretty high. Yeah, I remember being pretty high on him in the draft. I think he got drafted in the second round.
I don't remember.
He was more of a tweener. I think he was more of a tweener. Between we couldn't really figure out if we liked him better at guard or tackle. I think he played a little bit of both, if I'm not mistaken. So he's got like that versatility thing going for him, but I don't think he was great at either spot.
And then another big name, Lewis Seen, was another guy that.
Yep.
I mean, that just felt like a name that was big during the draft cycle. There's got to be something there. It feels like.
Yeah. So
I was never a fan of his.
No.
So
Scene kind of reminds me of, he has a little bit of I guess you want to say that kamikaze downhill style as a free safety. Like in coverage, he's a little all over the place, but high in athlete that's not afraid to come in and get really dirty in the running game as a tone setter. So it just depends. Like, he may blow something up in the backfield. He may bust the coverage and give up a 60-yarder. So it's really a spin of the wheel with him at any given time. But if you can kind of hone that in, reel him in, and train him to work within the scheme, you might have something there. It's just, I don't know if you want to take a chance on it.
There's one other name I'm going to throw out, but the previous regime talked about him during free agency, and that's Noah Brown, who got cut by the Texans.
Yeah, it's Texans.
Explosive wide receiver that they liked at one point. So another name that may be possible. Maybe.
Interesting. We'll see. I would probably steer away from anybody that the previous regime was high on at this point. Just saying.
Can't fix them all.
All right. Cool. Oh, thank you, everybody. Appreciate you guys joining us. Make sure you're subscribed, you're following, join the Patreon if you guys want to figure out all that fun news, like about the Easton Stick little inquiries this morning. Join the Patreon. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys joining us on this late, Tuesday night, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Salute.